Chapter 20. A flight, a fight, and a monster. They watched through the windows as black cars blocked off either end of the dam and undead soldiers filed onto the concrete structure. They ran out of the visitor center before the soldiers could box them in, but it didn't help much. They were still surrounded. Allie drew her knife, even though she knew it wouldn't do much. They were backed up against the wall near a cave in the side of the canyon that housed two winged bronze statues. It was a shrine to Zeus, or something like that. Allie hadn't really been paying attention when Thalia had explained it. She felt the cold edge of the wall against her back. Then something worse. A hand appeared out of nowhere and grabbed her braid, yanking her backwards over the side of the dam. Percy managed to grab her before she rolled over the wall to her death, but one of the skeletal soldiers gripped her hair, pulling on it like a lifeline. "Hold still!" Zoe unsheathed her hunter's knife and hacked the zombie hand off it at the wrist. It growled, but Percy smacked it in the face with the butt of his sword until it lost its grip and tumbled back into the canyon. Allie pried the fingers free of her hair and threw the dismembered hand down after its body. The soldiers were closing in. They had no escape, unless they wanted to follow Allie's assailant into the gorge. Percy turned to Thalia. "Pray to your father." "What?" She looked at him like he was crazy. "He never answers." "This time he will," Percy assured. "Just try." Thalia said a short, silent prayer. At first, nothing happened. Then the two bronze statues guarding Zeus's shrine stretched and moved. They were complaining about their shiny toes when Thalia got their attention. Soon, Percy, Thalia, Zoe, Grover, and Allie were soaring over the wide expanse of desert towards California. Allie couldn't describe the exhilaration of flying at high speed over hundreds of miles, but it was one of the coolest things she'd ever done. It wasn't like riding a Pegasus. She had no control, and her legs were dangling in midair. She kicked the snow off the top of a mountain as they streaked by. Finally, the statues alighted on a roof in San Francisco, placing their passengers lightly on the ground. As the statues flew off, Zoe led the others down to the street. Percy had explained about a conversation he'd had with Apollo. The god had advised Percy to seek out Nemeus, the old man of the sea. If Percy subdued him, the man would answer one question. They made their way to the docks. Zoe dressed Percy up like a homeless guy and sent him down to where a bunch of ragged-looking people stood in a line by a soup kitchen. It wasn't long before Percy was struggling with an old man at the edge of the dock. The pair splashed into the water. Allie led the others along the shore, following Percy as best she could. It was almost impossible to track something that was underwater, but when Percy resurfaced with the old man, they weren't too far off. They jogged down the beach to meet up with Percy, who was struggling to keep Nemeus in a headlock. "I yield," Nemeus gave in. "What is your question?" Percy released his neck, but kept a hold of his arm. His mind was buzzing with all the questions he could ask. He finally went with, "Where's the monster we seek?" Nemeus smirked. "That's a simple one." He jerked his head towards the water. "It's right there." "What?" Percy asked. "Sorry, kid. One question per capture." He wrenched free of Percy's grip and dove into the water. A cow's head popped through the surface of the water. "Moo." "Bessie?" Percy stared at the creature in wonder. It beat its fishtail, splashing the water. "That's not his name." Grover was staring at the cowfish intently. "You can understand it?" Thalia asked. Grover nodded. "It says it's the Phytaurus." The name triggered more questions and a long story about how if a half-blood child of the Big Three killed and used its blood, they would gain the power to overthrow Olympus. Allie pinched the bridge of her nose. "Of course. Just our luck that the monster capable of destroying Olympus has been following us this whole time." She stared at the innocent little creature. "What next? Are we going to get attacked by a chimera?" "Not quite." A man in a trench coat walked towards them on the dock, with a group of soldiers following him. Not undead soldiers, regular ones. But they had guns. Lots of guns. Allie recognized the man who had spoken from the Smithsonian. The Manticore. He was focused completely on Thalia. He promised her power, revenge, everything she could ever want. The daughter of Zeus looked like she was in a trance. The next few moments were a blur, but Percy managed to snap Thalia out of her stupor. There was an Iris message sent to camp, and the soldiers went completely nuts. Percy explained later that Dionysus had given them a hand and caused the soldiers to temporarily lose their minds so they could escape. Allie made a note to thank the grumpy camp director when she got back. They stopped along the shore of the river to make a game plan. Grover volunteered to take the Ephialtaris back to camp, where it would be safe. Percy had protested, but it was the only way. So Grover waded into the cold water and disappeared with Bessie. The sun was slipping closer to the horizon. If they wanted to save Annabeth and Artemis, they needed to get to the mountain on the other side of the river, and soon. No way they could get there on foot. Percy had an idea. Annabeth's dad had moved to San Francisco for a job. He would have a car. And a reason to help.